Hello guys and welcome back. Find that comfortable place, let your body grow heavy and allow your mind to drift. Tonight, we are once again traveling through the mists of time, back to a land of golden sands, divine kings, and monuments that touch the heavens. We are going to ancient Egypt, but great civilizations are not just built by gods and kings. They are built with sweat, grit, and an enormous amount of project management. So tonight, I invite you to imagine something different. You are not a pharaoh, you are not a scribe penning great histories. You have a job, a very important, very stressful and utterly thankless job. You are a middle manager, an overseer, a project lead for the single greatest construction project in the history of the world, a great pyramid. Your boss is a living god, your deadline is eternity, and your daily reality is a series of frustrating, impossible and quietly hilarious problems. So take a slow, deep breath. Let the complexities of your own world fade away, and let's step into the sandals of a man whose performance review is conducted by a deity. Your first work day is about to begin. The sun rises over the Giza Plateau with an unforgiving, spectacular brilliance. It is the first and most important deadline of your day. As the divine eye of Ra crests the horizon, it illuminates your life's work and your life's greatest headache. There it stands, the great pyramid of your lord, the living god, Pharaoh Khufu. It is a titanic man-made mountain of limestone, already a wonder of the world, yet it is only half complete, and you, Senmut, are the man responsible for finishing it. From your vantage point on a small rise, you can see the entire operation spread out before you. It's an organized anthill of staggering proportions. Thousands of workers, their bodies gleaming with sweat in the early morning light, move with a rhythmic purpose. You can hear the distant melodic chanting of the work gangs as they haul massive stone blocks on wooden sledges. You can hear the ceaseless chip 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 of 10,000 copple chisels shaping and dressing the stone. It is the symphony of construction, and you are its weary conductor. In your hand you hold your symbol of office, a roll of fine papyrus. It is your project plan, your schedule, your list of endless cascading problems. Your official title is Overseer of the King's Works, which sounds grand, but you know what you really are. You're a manager. Your primary goal is to ensure that the Pharaoh's stairway to the stars is completed before he has need of it. No pressure. This morning, however, the symphony sounds off. There is a discordant note in the air. A runner, a young boy slick with sweat, arrives at your side, panting. "Overseer Senmut," he gasps. "A message from the eastern quarries. There is a problem. The stone cutting has stopped." A cold knot forms in your stomach, a feeling you know all too well. The eastern quarries at Tura. That's where the finest, whitest, most beautiful limestone is cut for the outer casing of the pyramid. A halt in production there is not a small problem. It is a disaster that could throw your entire schedule into chaos. You dismiss the boy, grab your water skin, and begin the journey. You are ferried across the life-giving blue of the Nile on a simple reed boat. The journey provides a stark contrast. On one side, the fertile black land, teeming with life. On the other, the stark white desert, a world of stone and sun. As you approach the quarries at Tura, the glare from the limestone hills is so intense it forces you to squint. The air here tastes of dust and heat. And the runner was right. The place is eerily quiet. The usual rhythmic pounding of mallets is gone. The work gangs are sitting in the shade of the cliffs, sharpening their tools, drinking water, but not cutting stone. You see him standing alone, his arms crossed, staring at a newly exposed rock face. Bak, the chief mason. Bak is a man who seems to have been carved from the quarry itself. He is old, his skin the texture of weathered leather, his eyes narrowed against a lifetime of sun and dust. He is a master of his craft, a genius with stone, and he is without question the most stubborn man in the entire kingdom of Egypt. Bark it, you say, your voice calm and even, betraying none of the panic churning inside you. The chisels are quiet. My papyrus tells me we should have 20 blocks ready for the barges by noon. Explain. Bark does not turn to look at you. He simply gestures with his chin towards the rock face. Look at it, Senmut, he says, his voice a low grumble. Just look at that stone. You look. It looks like limestone. White, solid limestone. Back. It will hold its weight. Hold its weight. He finally turns to you, his eyes blazing with artistic indignation. We are not building a grain silo. We are building an eternal vessel for a god. This stone is impure. It has a greyish cast. There are flaws. It does not shine with the inner light of Ra. It is dead stone. It is unlucky. You sigh. It's not a structural problem, it's an artistic one. You, the manager, are now in a debate about the soul of a rock. Bark, the royal architect, approved this vein. The vizier himself saw the survey. This is the stone we have been allotted. The vizier does not have to cut it. Bark spits. The architect does not have to dress it. I do. My men do. We will not use our craft on inferior material. The pharaoh's spirit will not rest easy in a house built of mediocrity. It will bring a curse upon us all. You can feel the morning slipping away. The barges are waiting. Your schedule, so meticulously planned on your papyrus scroll, is turning into fiction. You decide to try a different tactic. Flattery. That is why this task falls to you, great Bark, you say, your voice smooth as Nile silt. A lesser mason could not handle this stone, but your skill is legendary. In your hands, even this humble rock will be transformed. You can make it sing. Only you can bring forth its inner light. The old man's expression softens slightly. He is susceptible to praise, as all great artists are. But he's not a fool. Flattery will not sharpen my chisels, Senmut. The stone is what it is. Time for the practical argument. The blocks from this section are for the upper layers on the northern face, you reason. They will be 300 cubits in the air. No one will see the greyish cast. Not you, not me, and with all respect to his divinity, not the pharaoh. Bark says, his voice low and firm, and the gods will know. You are running out of options. The sun is higher now, beating down on the white stone, and with it the pressure mounts. You play your final card, a gentle veiled threat wrapped in the language of piety. You are right, of course, Back, you concede with a nod. The gods will know, and if this delay displeases them, if the pharaoh's journey to the stars is postponed because the barges are empty, who will the gods hold responsible? Will they blame a humble manager like me, who only follows the plans he is given? Or will they look upon the master mason, the great Back, the one man who had the skill to do the work, but refused to lift his hammer? You let the question hang in the hot, dusty air. You watch Back's jaw work silently. He looks at the rock face, then at his idle crew, then back at you. He is trapped between his professional pride and his fear of divine retribution. The silence stretches on for a full minute. Finally, with a deep, weary sigh that seems to carry the weight of the entire quarry, he turns to his foreman. You heard the overseer. He grunts. The stone is acceptable. Begin the cutting. A collective sigh of relief seems to run through the assembled workers. The rhythmic sound of mallet on chisel begins to echo through the quarry once more. You have won. But as you make the journey back across the Nile, watching the sun begin its descent behind your magnificent, infuriating pyramid, you feel no sense of power. You have strained your relationship with your best foreman, you have compromised on the quality of the material, and you are already half a day behind schedule. You unroll your papyrus, dip your reed pen in ink, and make a note of the delay, knowing it will have a ripple effect on every other stage of the project. Being the project manager for a living god, you reflect, is a quarry quarrel all its own. For 3 days after your spirited negotiation with Back the mason, the work at the quarry proceeds at a ferocious pace. It seems the old man, having committed to the impure stone, is now determined to prove that his skill can overcome any flaw in the material. Blocks of fine white Torah limestone arrive on barges at the Giza dock faster than ever before. Your papyrus scroll, for the first time in weeks, begins to reflect a project that is almost back on schedule. This feeling, you have learned, is the most dangerous feeling a manager can have. It is the calm before the storm. The storm arrives in the form of a man named Kenamon. Where back the mason was a wiry artist, Kenamon, the foreman of the ramps, is a mountain. He is a former soldier, a giant of a man with a chest as broad as a temple door and a voice that can be heard over the chanting of 1,000 workers. He is a man of action and practicality, not philosophy, and as he approaches you at the base of the great ramp, his face is a mask of grim concern. You are watching his men at work. It is a spectacle of raw, coordinated power. Hundreds of men, organised into work gangs, hauling a single, multi-tone block of limestone up the massive earthen ramp that snakes around your growing pyramid. Their bodies are slick with sweat and Nile mud, which they use to lubricate the wooden sledge's path. Their chanting is a hypnotic, powerful song, the rhythm of their voices setting the pace for their pulling. It is the heartbeat of your project. But today, you notice the heartbeat is slightly irregular. Overseer Senmut, Kenamon's voice booms, even at a conversational volume. You turn to face him. "We have a problem." "I can see that, Kenamon," you reply, gesturing to the base of the ramp. The new blocks from Back's quarry are beginning to pile up, creating a logjam. The stones are arriving faster than your men are moving them. "My men are strong," Kenamon says, his gaze unwavering. "Their spirits are high, but their tools are weak. The gods demand strong men, but they also demand strong sledges and strong ropes. We have neither." He points to a discard pile nearby. You see the splintered remains of 3 massive wooden sledges, their runners cracked beyond repair. 3 have broken since the sun rose, he says. And the ropes look. He picks up a length of the thick rope used for hauling. It is woven from papyrus reeds, a masterpiece of the rope maker's art. But you can see that it is frayed, its fibres strained and thinning. Rope snapped an hour ago. No one was hurt by the grace of the gods. But if a rope snaps while hauling a block this high, he glances up the immense slope of the ramp. It will not just kill the men behind it. It will slide all the way down and crush the entire gang. It will destroy the ramp. It will halt the work for a month. You know he is right. The safety and speed of the entire operation depend on a steady supply of new sledges and thick, reliable ropes. And you know, with a sinking feeling in your stomach, why you don't have them. "The wood you promised, Overseer," Kenamon says, his voice low and serious. "The strong cedar from the foreign lands, the wood that does not splinter. Where is it? Where is it?" It is a question that has haunted your sleep for the past week. It is supposed to be on a ship, somewhere on the Great Green Sea. You picture the entire, impossibly complex journey. Your agents, sent by Pharaoh himself, had to travel for weeks to the port of Byblos, in the land of Lebanon. There they had to engage in lengthy, delicate negotiations with the local king to purchase the rights to his kingdom's finest cedar trees. Mighty ancient trees that did not grow in Egypt and whose wood was legendary for its strength and resistance to rot. Then, the trees had to be felled, dragged to the coast and loaded onto a sturdy Egyptian sea vessel. That vessel then had to undertake the long, perilous journey across the open sea, navigating by the stars, at the mercy of the winds and currents, praying to avoid storms and the pirates who preyed on such wealthy cargo. If it survived all that, it would arrive at the Nile Delta, where its precious cargo would be transferred to river barges for the final leg of the journey to Giza. At any point in that long chain, a single thing could have gone wrong. A storm could have sunk the ship. The captain could have been lazy or incompetent. The winds could have been unfavourable for weeks on end. The king of Blidlos could have changed his mind and doubled the price at the last minute. And you, Senmut, standing here in the dust and heat of Giza, have absolutely no way of knowing. There is no magic scrying bowl, no messenger bird that can fly across the sea. There is only waiting. Your entire project, your reputation, the very legacy of your pharaoh is being held hostage by a missing boat. You cannot tell Kanamon this. A manager cannot say, "I don't know." It is a sign of weakness, an invitation to chaos. You must project an aura of calm, divine confidence. The shipment from Byblos is favored by the gods, Kanamon, you say, your voice much. And while we await Ra's guidance, Overseer, what do we do? My men are afraid. You fall back on the one thing a manager can do when faced with a problem he cannot solve. You improvise, you innovate, you make do. We must be resourceful, you announce. Send the broken sledges to the carpenters, have them salvage what they can. We will reinforce the old ones. And tell the rope makers to take the old ropes and braid them together. A double-braided rope will have twice the strength, will it not? You see a flicker of doubt in Kanamon's eyes. He is a practical man. He knows that a repaired tool is never as good as a new one. A double-braided rope is heavy and clumsy, Overseer, and a sledge with a patched runner is a sledge that knows how to break. You are asking my men to place their lives in the hands of damaged goods. I am asking your men to trust in the ingenuity of Egypt and in the protection of the gods, you say firmly. Kanamon holds your gaze for a long moment, then gives a slow, reluctant nod. He knows he has no other choice, but he adds a condition. Very well, O seer. We will use the old tools, but I will not risk my men's lives for your schedule. I will tell them to pull slowly, to be cautious, to listen for the sound of splintering wood and fraying rope. A slow pull is a safe pull. He turns and walks away, bellowing orders to his sub-foremen, and you watch as a wave of caution ripples through the work gangs. The powerful, energetic chanting softens, becoming more hesitant. The pace of the hauling, which was already a slow, grinding crawl, visibly decelerates. The men are still working, but they are working with fear in their hearts, and fear is a heavy burden to haul. You stand at the base of your pyramid, a monument of stone and ambition, and you feel utterly powerless. You are surrounded by thousands of the strongest men in the world, with a mountain of perfect stone at your disposal, and the entire project is grinding to a halt, all because of a few missing planks of wood floating on a distant sea. You look north, past the shimmering heat haze of the delta, as if you could spot a sail on the horizon. You cannot. You can only wait. With a heavy heart, you unroll your papyrus scroll. You dip your pen, and next to the entry about stone block acquisitions, you make a new entry. Critical shortage of cedar wood. Rope and sledge production halted. Ram percent rate reduced by half. Supply chain management, you realize, is simply another form of prayer. A prayer offered to the wind. For 5 long days, the slow, cautious pace of the work continues. The cedar wood from Byblos has still not arrived. Your carpenters have become masters of patching and mending, but everyone knows the sledges are fragile and the ropes are untrustworthy. A tense, nervous energy hangs over the Gize Plateau, as tangible as the heat and the dust. The men are working, but they are working in fear. And you have learned that fear is a poor mortar for building an eternal monument. The breaking point does not come with a snapping rope or a collapsing sledge, as you had dreaded. It comes at the end of the workday, in the sprawling village of mud brick huts where the workers live. This is where the men receive their wages, the currency that truly powers this entire enterprise. Not gold or silver, but fresh bread and good, strong beer. It is their food, their comfort, their reward, and today the payroll is an insult. You are making your evening rounds through the village when you first sense the shift in the atmosphere. The usual boisterous camaraderie is gone. There is no singing, no laughing, no friendly wrestling. Instead, the men are gathered in small, grim-faced groups, murmuring angrily to one another. You see them holding up their daily rations with expressions of pure disgust. You walk over to a group and inspect the cause of their anger. The bread is not the usual dense, hearty, nourishing loaf they are accustomed to. It is a sad, small, flat thing, the crust blackened and burnt to charcoal, the inside dry and brittle. It looks less like food and more like a slab of scorched earth. The beer is even worse. Normally, Egyptian beer is a thick, nutritious porridge-like beverage, a filling and slightly alcoholic meal in a cup. But the liquid being ladled from the great clay jars today is a thin, pale, watery gruel. It has the sour taste of a brew that has barely had time to ferment, offering neither sustenance nor solace. Your heart sinks. This is a new front in your war against delays, and it is perhaps the most dangerous one yet. Kenamon, the formidable foreman of the ramps, finds you. He is not alone. He is flanked by a dozen other gang leaders, their faces hard as granite in the fading light of the setting sun. Overseer Senmut Kanaman says, his voice a low rumble of contained fury. He holds up one of the burnt loaves for you to see. We have accepted your words about the ropes and sledges. My men risk their bones on your ingenuity every day. They do this for the glory of the pharaoh, yes, but they also do this for a full belly at the end of the day. This, he says, his voice dripping with contempt, is not a wage, it is an insult. And this, he gestures to a man holding a cup of the watery beer, is not fit for the goats. He takes a step closer. The men's strength is failing, Overseer. They are pulling stones that weigh more than a hippo, and you are feeding them burnt chaff and sour water. But worse than their strength is their spirit. It is broken. They say the gods have abandoned this project. They are talking of laying down their tools at dawn. Not a slowdown this time, a full strike. A strike, the word sends a chill down your spine despite the evening heat. A strike would be a catastrophe, an act of rebellion that could see these men beaten or executed, and you stripped of your title and exiled in disgrace. You know you cannot simply make promises. You must first understand the root of the problem. You leave Kenamon with a promise to investigate and hurry to the source of the provisions. Your first stop is the bakery, a massive complex of ovens and mills working day and night. You find the head baker, a man whose family has been baking for the kings for 5 generations. He is distraught. The grain shipment from the northern farms was late, Overseer, he explains, wringing his flour-covered hands. And the quality, may the gods forgive me, it was full of sand and chaff. I had to grind it twice, and even then the dough would not hold. I had to bake it at a higher heat just to form a crust. It is all I could do. It is the same story at the brewery. The master brewer, a priest of his craft, tells you the barley shipment was just as poor. There is no strength in the grain, Overseer. I used my finest yeast culture, the one passed down from my grandfather, but it is like trying to build a temple out of mud bricks without straw. The brew is weak. It is a disgrace to my house and to the men who drink it. You realize the truth. This is not the fault of the bakers or the brewers. It is another supply chain nightmare, this time a domestic one. A poor harvest, a delayed grain barge on the Nile. You know what you must do. You send word for all the work gangs to assemble in the main square of the village. As night falls, you stand on a raised platform, looking out at a sea of thousands of tired, angry, torchlit faces. Kenamon and the other foremen stand at the front, their arms crossed, their expressions challenging. The murmuring of the crowd is a low, dangerous hum. You raise your hands for silence. You are not a king, and you are not a priest. You are a manager, and your only tool right now is words. Men of Giza, you begin, your voice projecting across the square. Builders of the horizon of Khufu, I have stood with you on the ramps. I have seen the sweat on your brows and the strength in your arms, and I have seen the food you were given today. You pause, letting the weight of that admission settle. I have tasted the bread, and it was ash in my mouth. I have tasted the beer, and it was a sorrow in a cup. And I say to you now, it was not worthy of you. It was not worthy of the men who build a stairway for a god to walk upon. A murmur of surprise runs through the crowd. This was not the rebuke they were expecting. I have spoken to the bakers and the brewers, you continue. They are good men, and their hearts are as heavy as yours. The fault is not theirs. The fault lies with the unfavourable winds on the great river which delayed the barges from the rich fields of the delta. The fault lies with a poor patch of soil that gave us a weaker barley this season. These are the trials the gods send to test our resolve. to see if we are truly worthy of this sacred task. You lower your voice, making it more personal, more intimate. They say a man's spirit can be measured by the strength of his arm. I say it is measured by the strength of his heart when he is weary. Look at what you have built. You point towards the pyramid, its immense dark shape silhouetted against the starry sky. Generations from now, when the mountains themselves have turned to dust, they will speak of the men who raised this mountain to the heavens. They will speak of you. This is not just stone. This is your immortality. You let that sink in. Then you make your promise. I have sent runners to the royal granaries at Memphis. A new shipment of the finest, richest barley and emmer wheat from the pharaoh's personal reserves is already on its way. It will arrive with the morning sun. I give you my word as a humble servant of our Lord Khufu that tomorrow's beer will be strong enough for the gods, and tomorrow's bread will be a feast worthy of the heroes who build this great wonder. You finish, your throat raw. For a moment there is only silence. Then a single man in the front raises his cup and lets out a cheer. Another joins him. Soon the entire square is filled with the sound of thousands of men cheering, their anger replaced, for now, by a renewed sense of purpose. You have done it. The strike is averted. As you step down from the platform, Kenamon gives you a single, sharp nod. It is a gesture of grudging respect. You have bought yourself another day. But as you walk back to the quiet solitude of your tent, the cheering fades, and a cold anxiety returns. Your entire monumental project is so fragile. It is balanced on the strength of a rope, the timeliness of a single ship, and now the quality of a barley harvest. You lie on your pallet, exhausted, and you have one last terrifying thought. What if the good grain doesn't arrive tomorrow? By the grace of Ra and the timely arrival of the royal grain barges, the crisis has passed. The beer is once again thick and nourishing, the bread is hearty and wholesome, and the men are working with renewed vigour. The great ramps are once again alive with the powerful, rhythmic chanting of the work gangs, and the pile of fine limestone from the Tora quarries is slowly, steadily shrinking. For the first time in what feels like an eternity, you allow yourself a moment of quiet satisfaction. The project is moving forward. This peace is shattered late one evening by the arrival of a royal messenger, his sandals kicking up dust as he runs to your command tent. He bears a single heavy papyrus scroll, sealed with the intricate personal glyph of the royal architect himself, the great Hemiunu. You accept the scroll with a sense of profound reverence and deep-seated dread. Hemiunu is not just an architect. He is a force of nature, a cousin of the pharaoh, a high priest, and a man widely believed to converse directly with the gods. His genius is undeniable. The grand, soaring design of the pyramid, its perfect astronomical alignments, its breathtaking scale, it all sprang from his divinely inspired mind. But he is an artist, a poet of stone and space. He does not think in practical terms. He communicates in metaphors and riddles. His plans are less like blueprints and more like sacred texts, beautiful to behold but infuriatingly difficult to interpret. And this scroll, the messenger informs you, contains the final, blessed designs for the most sacred space in the entire structure, the king's chamber and the grand gallery that leads to it. The master masons of the interior crews are ready. They await your instructions at dawn. After the messenger departs, you retreat into the quiet solitude of your tent. Under the flickering light of several oil lamps, you carefully break the clay seal and unroll the papyrus on your large work table. It is, as you expected, a masterpiece. The lines are drawn with an elegant, confident hand. The hieroglyphs are calligraphed with perfect artistry. But as you begin to read, the familiar feeling of managerial despair washes over you. There are almost no numbers, no precise measurements in royal cubits, palms, or digits. Instead, there are poetic instructions. For the grand gallery, the magnificent, high-roofed passage leading upwards, Hemiunu has written, "Let it ascend towards the imperishable stars, its height the measure of a god's breath, its walls polished to the darkness of a starless night." that the soul of the king may begin its journey in beauty. It is beautiful, it is inspiring, it is also completely useless. What, by all the gods of Egypt, is the precise measure of a god's breath? You make a note to assign it the maximum possible height the structural engineers will allow and hope for the best. For the king's chamber, he writes, "The chamber shall be a vessel of eternity, crafted from the finest granite of the south, the colour of the heart's blood at twilight. Let its proportions sing a silent hymn to the..." You know he means the red granite from Aswan, but a silent hymn to the cosmos is not a measurement you can give to a stone cutter. You scan the document, your anxiety growing, until you find the most critical and most confusing part of the entire plan. It concerns the two narrow shafts that lead upwards from the king's chamber, pointing north and south. These are not for ventilation. These are star shafts, sacred channels to allow the pharaoh's soul, his Ba, to travel out from his tomb and ascend to the heavens, to take his place among the imperishable stars. Their alignment must be perfect. An error of a single degree would be a spiritual catastrophe, leaving the soul of your god-king trapped, wandering forever. The southern shaft is clearly marked. It is to be aligned with the belt of Osiris, a simple enough calculation, but the northern shaft is another matter. Next to the elegant line indicating the shaft, where there should be a precise number indicating the angle of ascent, Hemiunu has drawn a single, small, and utterly baffling hieroglyph. You lean closer, holding a lamp over the papyrus. It looks, to your weary eyes, like a duck, but its neck is twisted at an unnatural angle, and its head is turned to look directly backwards, over its own body. You have spent your life reading and writing the sacred symbols of your people. You have never seen this one before. A confused, backward-glancing duck, the entire interior construction team, the most skilled master craftsmen in all of Egypt, are waiting for you. They cannot cut the multi-ton granite blocks for the chamber walls until they know the precise angle for this shaft, and you have to tell them what it is. Your first instinct is to go and wake Hemiunu, but that is impossible. He is royalty and a high priest. His nights are for sleeping, for dreaming, for communing with the gods who give him these frustratingly beautiful plans. To disturb him over what he would surely consider a simple matter would be a grave insult. The problem is yours alone to solve. You pace the floor of your tent, the sand crunching under your sandals. You try to think like an artist, like a poet. What could it mean? A backward-glancing duck? Is it a metaphor? Look to the past for guidance? That's no help. Is it a pun? The gods know Hemiunu loves a clever play on words, but you can think of no word for duck or for star that would make any sense. You summon your chief scribe, Pentu, a wise old man with eyes that have seen the construction of 3 lesser pyramids. You show him the symbol. He squints at it for a long time, stroking his thin beard. "Perhaps, overseer," he says slowly, "it means the stone must be cut by a man who walks with a limp, like a duck." "Don't be a fool, Pentu," you snap. "Your patience wearing thin, not a poultry market." Pentu bows his head. "My apologies, overseer. It is a perplexing symbol. The great Hemiunu's mind is a river whose depths we cannot fathom." He is right. You are trying to fathom the unfathomable. Hours pass. The oil in your lamps burns low. You stare at the duck until your eyes cross. You are about to give up, to risk the great man's wrath and send a messenger, when your gaze drifts to the wall of your tent. On it hangs a large, detailed star chart, a map of the heavens used by your surveyors to align the entire pyramid. You stare at it, your mind numb with exhaustion. You trace the familiar constellations, the Great Bull, the Scorpion, the eternal path of Osiris, and then, in a forgotten corner of the northern sky, you see it. It is a minor constellation, a faint grouping of stars only clearly visible for a few weeks during the height of the Nile's inundation. It is a constellation so insignificant it is often left off lesser charts, a grouping of 5 stars. If you squint, and if you have a mind as poetic and strange as Hemiunu's, you could, just possibly, imagine it looked like a duck with its neck twisted backwards. It hits you like a bolt of lightning. He hadn't drawn a symbol at all. He had drawn a picture of the sky. The angle of the shaft was not a number, it was a destination. It was meant to point directly at this obscure, almost forgotten constellation. It is at once the most brilliant and the most infuriatingly unhelpful instruction you have ever seen. A wave of pure, unadulterated relief washes over you, so powerful it almost brings you to your knees. It is followed immediately by a surge of profound annoyance. You grab your reed brush, a fresh sheet of papyrus, and your astronomical tables. With frantic energy, you perform the complex calculations, translating the star's celestial position into a precise earthly angle of inclination. Just as the first pale light of dawn touches the horizon, you have your answer. You rush from your tent, your calculations clutched in your hand. You find the foreman of the interior masons, a man whose face is etched with worry. You do not show him the drawing of the duck. You show him your calculations. You give him the number. 31 degrees, 14 digits, you say, your voice hoarse with exhaustion. Cut the star shaft at precisely that angle. The foreman's face breaks into a relieved smile. He bows and hurries off to give the orders. The sacred work can begin. You walk back towards your tent as the sun rises, casting a golden glow on your pyramid. Another crisis averted. You look at Hemiunu's beautiful, maddening scroll still lying on your table. Your job, you realize, is not just to manage stone and men. It is to act as a translator between the realms of gods and men, between divine poetry and earthly engineering. And you think that perhaps the most important tool for building a pyramid is not the chisel or the sledge, but a deep and abiding patience for the minds of geniuses. The work proceeds. The new grain has restored the strength of the workers, and the arrival, finally, of the cedar wood from Byblos has allowed for the construction of new, strong sledges and thick, reliable ropes. The sound of the work gangs is energetic once more. The star shafts, guided by your late-night calculations, are being cut with divine precision. A fragile, functional rhythm has returned to the Giza Plateau, and it is this very progress that triggers the inevitable. A royal herald clad in the pristine white linen of the palace arrives at your tent. He does not run, he walks with a serene and intimidating purpose. He unrolls a small scroll and reads the proclamation in a high, clear voice. By the will of the Golden Horus, the Lord of the Two Lands, the son of Ra, Khufu, His Majesty requires the presence of his humble servant, the Overseer Senmut, in his royal court at the hour of noon. You will present your report on the progress of his horizon of eternity. The words are formal, but the message is simple and terrifying. It is time for your performance review. The morning is a blur of anxious preparation. This is not a simple meeting, it is a sacred ritual. You bathe in water scented with lotus. You put on your finest pleated linen kilt, one reserved for only the most solemn occasions. You meticulously review your papyri, the columns of numbers and notes that represent weeks of chaos, crisis, and narrowly averted disasters. How do you translate the gritty reality of a supply chain delay into a report fit for a god? How do you explain the concept of a morale issue to a being whose divine will is supposed to be the only motivation required? You rehearse your speech, your voice hollow in the confines of your tent. You cannot lie. The gods and the army of scribes who record every single block of stone and measure of grain know the truth. The project is behind schedule. All you can do is frame the truth in a cloak of such pious reverence that it sounds less like failure and more like a heroic struggle against the forces of chaos. As noon approaches, you make the walk from the construction site to the pharaoh's temporary palace. It is a journey between worlds. You leave behind the noise of construction, the shouting, the chipping, the chanting, and enter a realm of profound and unnerving silence. The air here is cool, tasting of incense and flowers, not dust and sweat. Polished alabaster floors replace the shifting sands. Immense, silent guards, their faces impassive, watch you from every archway. It is a world designed to remind any mortal of their insignificance. You are led into the audience chamber. The room is vast, its ceiling held aloft by towering columns painted with scenes of the gods. Beams of sunlight, thick with dancing dusk motes, slant down from high windows, illuminating the throne at the far end of the hall, and on the throne sits your pharaoh. Khufu is not just a man, he is an icon, a divine vessel. He sits perfectly still, a living statue, wearing the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt. His hands holding the crook and flail rest on his knees. His gaze is fixed on something far beyond the walls of the room, far beyond the horizon itself. He is not looking at you, he is looking at eternity. The vizier, his most trusted advisor, stands at the right hand of the throne, his faith as unreadable as his master's. You are led to a spot in the center of the vast floor. As protocol demands, you perform the full prostration, laying yourself flat on the cool stone, your forehead pressed to the ground. You remain there, a small, humble shape in a vast golden room, until the vizier's voice, sharp and clear, gives you permission to rise to your knees. "Overseer Senmud," the vizier says, his voice echoing slightly in the hall. "The son of Ra, the lord of all he surveys, would hear your report on the progress of his eternal home." You begin, your own voice sounding small and thin. You try to keep it steady. You start with the positives, the successes. "Ah, great Horus, divine majesty, may you live forever. The work proceeds by your will. The stones from Tura, having been found worthy, are laid with reverence and skill. The sacred inner chambers, following the divine plan of the great Hemiunu, now begin to take shape. Your horizon rises to greet your father Ra, each and every day." You take a breath. Now comes the difficult part. There have been trials, great God, tests of our devotion, sent to ensure that only the most worthy efforts build your home. You explain the quarry problem, not as a dispute with a stubborn mason, but as a pious pause to ensure the chosen stone was pure enough to house a divine spirit. You explain the supply chain nightmare, not as a late boat, but as a test of patience, where the winds of the great green sea, commanded only by the gods, held your fine cedar wood in their embrace until the most auspicious moment for its arrival. You explain the workers' near strike not as a complaint about bad beer, but as a moment where the mortal hearts of your workers were tested, and after being reminded of their sacred duty to build for you, their car and bar were strengthened and their loyalty reaffirmed. You speak for what feels like an hour, though it is likely only a few minutes. Throughout your entire report, the pharaoh does not move, he does not blink, he does not react in any way. His silence is a vast, empty canvas onto which you project all of your deepest fears. Is he angry? Is he bored? Does he even comprehend these mortal trifles of logistics and labour? Or is your failure so profound that it is beneath his divine notice? When you finish, the silence in the hall is absolute. It stretches on, each heartbeat a lifetime. You remain on your knees, your head bowed, waiting for judgment. Finally, the pharaoh makes a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture with 2 fingers of his right hand. The vizier leans down, listens to a whisper you cannot hear, and then straightens. He looks at you, his eyes cold and penetrating. The living God has heard the report of his servant, the vizier announces. He notes the pious struggles. He understands the tests of the gods. He has but one question for you, overseer. You hold your breath. Will his horizon be ready when his soul is ready to ascend? This is it, the only question that matters. All the problems, all the excuses, all the explanations, they all boil down to this: yes or no. You look up past the vizier and meet the distant, eternal gaze of the man on the throne, and in that moment you feel the weight of every block of stone, every coil of rope, every single worker settling onto your shoulders. You are the single point upon which this entire enterprise rests. You find a courage you did not know you possess. "Yes, my lord," you say, your voice clear and strong. "It will be ready." The pharaoh gives a single, slow nod. The audience is over. You are dismissed. You prostrate yourself once more and then back out of the chamber, your legs shaking with relief and the immense burden of the promise you just made. You have promised a God that you will bend time, tame the sea, and command the hearts of men to meet his final divine deadline. You step back out into the blinding, brilliant sunlight and the familiar chaotic symphony of construction. This is your world, not the silent golden hall of the gods, but the loud, dusty, imperfect world of getting things done. You look up at the Great Pyramid, your silent, magnificent partner in this impossible task. It seems to loom even larger than before. Your race against mortality has a finish line, and you just promised to God you would cross it. With a deep breath, you unroll your papyrus and get back to work. The legend of the little general, where the myth began. Imagine, if you will, the man himself. Napoleon Bonaparte, a name that conjures images of grand battles, of cannons roaring across a fog-shrouded field at Austerlitz, of the great tricolour flag flying over Paris. This was a man whose ambition was as vast as the continent itself, a man who redrew the map of Europe, who created a legal code that still influences laws around the world today. He rose from a minor Corsican noble to become the Emperor of France, a figure so powerful that entire coalitions of kings and empires had to unite just to stop him. He was a giant of history, a colossus, and yet what is the first image that often springs to mind? For many of us, it's not the brilliant strategist or the revolutionary lawgiver. It's a caricature, a tiny, comically serious man in a very large black bicorn hat. We picture him with his hand tucked into his waistcoat, a perpetual scowl on his face, perhaps standing on a crate to see over a battlefield map, or stamping his little foot in a fit of rage. Yes, he conquered half of Europe, inspired legions of men to follow him into the mouth of a cannon, and changed the course of Western civilization. But the rumour that he couldn't reach the top shelf? That somehow is the story that stuck the longest. It has become a running joke for over 200 years, a piece of historical shorthand. But where did it come from? How did this giant of a man become known to history as the Little General? To find the answer, we must first cross the English Channel. Our journey into the myth begins not in France, but in the heart of the nation that feared him most, Great Britain. Picture London at the turn of the 19th century. The city is lit by gas lamps. The streets are noisy with the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on cobblestones. And in the windows of the print shops, a new kind of warfare is being waged. It is a war of paper and ink, of caricature and propaganda. And its primary target is Napoleon. To the British, Napoleon was not just a rival, he was the ultimate bogeyman, a revolutionary tyrant who threatened their very way of life. They needed to fight him not just on the seas and in the fields of Spain, but in the minds of their own people. The goal was to cut him down to size, both literally and figuratively. And the man who wielded the sharpest cartoonist named James Gillray. Imagine Gillray in his studio, the air thick with the smell of ink and turpentine, leaning over a copper plate by the light of a flickering candle. With deft, merciless strokes of his engraving tool, he created the image of Napoleon that would echo through the centuries. He did not draw a formidable general, he drew little Boney. In Gillray's cartoons, Napoleon is a pouting, petulant child, a miniature terror in oversized boots. In one famous image, King George III of England, a large and stately figure, holds a minuscule Napoleon in the palm of his hand, examining him with a spyglass, as if he were a curious insect. In another, Gillray depicts a tiny Napoleon carving up the globe with the British Prime Minister struggling to reach his half of the world. He is shown throwing tantrums, being chased by geese, being bottled up like a genie. The message was clear and relentless. This man is not a giant, he is a joke. He is small, absurd, and not to be truly feared. It was a masterful campaign of psychological warfare designed to strip away the emperor's aura of power and make him seem ridiculous. And it worked brilliantly. The British public consumed these images, laughed at them, and the idea of Little Boney became deeply ingrained in their culture. But propaganda alone does not create a myth with such staying power. There had to be a seed of truth, a number, a fact that could be twisted, and that seed was planted by a simple, cross-channel misunderstanding, a classic case of being lost in translation. Let us travel now from the smoky print shops of London to the quiet room on the lonely island of St. Helena, where Napoleon died in exile in 1821. An autopsy was performed by his French physician, Dr. François Antomarchi. As was standard practice, the doctor recorded the emperor's height. The official measurement written down in the autopsy report was 5 pieds 2 pouces, 5 feet 2 inches. When this report eventually made its way to England, the British press seized upon it with glee. 5'2", they crowed. The number was a gift. It confirmed everything their caricatures had been saying for years. Here was the proof. The great tyrant, the terror of Europe, was barely taller than a schoolboy. The number was printed in newspapers, repeated in pamphlets, and became the final nail in the coffin of Napoleon's public stature. But here is where the story takes its turn. Here is where the myth solidifies around a simple, overlooked fact. The French and the British, despite being separated by only a narrow channel of water, did not use the same system of measurement. Imagine the French foot, the pied du doigt, and the French inch, the pouce. The French inch was longer than the British inch. A single French pouce was about 2.71 centimetres, while a British inch was only 2.54 centimetres. It may seem like a tiny difference, a matter of millimetres, but when you add it up over 5 feet and 2 inches, the discrepancy becomes significant. So when Dr. Antomarchi wrote 5 feet 2 inches in French units, he was describing a man who was, in British imperial units, approximately 5 feet and 6.5 inches tall, roughly 169 centimetres. The British press, either through genuine ignorance or, more likely, a willful decision not to let a good story be ruined by the facts, did not perform the conversion. They took the number 5'2" and presented it to their audience as if it were measured in their own familiar inches. And so a man of average height was officially, and forever in the popular imagination, reborn as a short man. It was the perfect storm. A brilliant and relentless propaganda campaign by his greatest enemy, combined with a simple, convenient, and widely misunderstood piece of data. The legend was born. The image of the tiny, furious general was cemented in place, a caricature so powerful it has managed to outlast the empire he built. As we let this first piece of the puzzle settle, a question lingers in the quiet air. But was he really that short, or was it all just a clever British marketing campaign? We left our story with a tantalizing question hanging in the air. Was Napoleon's reputation for being short simply a masterpiece of British propaganda, fueled by a convenient misunderstanding of measurements? The answer lies hidden in the quiet, dusty archives of history, in faded ink on brittle paper, and in understanding the records themselves. Let's peel back the layers of myth and look at the records themselves. Our first piece of evidence, as we know, is the autopsy report written by Dr. Antomarchi, which recorded the emperor's height as 5 pieds 2 pouces, 5 feet and 2 inches in French units. We know that when converted, this comes out to approximately 5 feet 6.5 inches in modern imperial measurement. But this is just one data point, taken after his death. Are there others? Let's travel further back in time, before the exile, before the empire, before he was anything more than a young, ambitious officer from Corsica. Imagine a military clerk in a stuffy recruitment office in Paris, the air smelling of old paper and sealing wax. A young Napoleon Bonaparte stands before him, posture straight, his gaze intense. The clerk takes his measurements for the official military rolls. These records still exist, and they corroborate the autopsy report. Throughout his early military career, his height was consistently recorded at around 5 feet 2 or 5 feet 3 inches in French units. So the number itself is consistent. The error lies entirely in the conversion. But this brings us to the most crucial piece of the puzzle, the one that truly debunks the myth of the little general. A height of 5 feet 6.5 inches might not sound particularly tall today in a world of improved nutrition and modern medicine. But to judge Napoleon by the standards of the 21st century is like judging a horse-drawn carriage by the speed of a sports car. We must place him in his own time. Let us imagine walking through the streets of Paris in the year 1800. The world, you would notice, is a slightly smaller place. The average height for a man in France at the turn of the 19th century was just about 5 feet 5 inches, around 165 cp. Decades of inconsistent food supply, childhood diseases that are now easily preventable, and the general hardships of life meant that people were, on the whole, shorter. A man of 5 feet 8 inches would have been considered quite tall. So when we take Napoleon's height of 5'6.5 and place it against the backdrop of his contemporaries, a startling fact emerges. Napoleon Bonaparte was not short. In fact, he was slightly taller than the average Frenchman of his era. The great military bogeyman of Britain, the man lampooned for his diminutive stature, was actually of perfectly average, even slightly above apprehensed height. So, if he wasn't physically short, why did the perception persist so strongly even among his own men? The answer has to do with two things that defined his image: the men he surrounded himself with, and the hat he wore on his head. First, let's consider his companions. Napoleon, a master of psychology and image, knew the importance of an impressive military presence. He created an elite unit, his personal bodyguards, who would become legendary, the Imperial Guard. These were the best of the best, the veterans of his toughest campaigns, men whose loyalty was absolute. And they had one very specific recruitment requirement: they had to be tall. The Grenadiers of the Old Guard, the most prestigious unit, were required to be at least 5 feet 10 inches tall in French units. That's over 6 feet tall by modern standards. Imagine the scene: nobles, a man of 5.5 feet on his horse, reviewing his troops. He is surrounded on all sides by his Imperial Guard, these hand-picked giants towering over him in their magnificent uniforms and enormous bearskin hats that added another foot to their height. To any onlooker, the visual effect would be immediate and dramatic. The commander would by necessity look small in comparison to the human mountains he had chosen for his guard. It was this very fact that earned him one of his most famous nicknames. It was not, as the British propaganda might suggest, a term of derision. It was a term of affection, given to him by his own soldiers. They called him Le Petit Caporal, the Little Corporal. It wasn't an insult about his height. It was a fond nickname that originated during his early Italian campaigns, when his youth and his tendency to personally sight and aim the cannons alongside the common artillerymen endeared him to his troops. It spoke of his camaraderie, his willingness to get his hands dirty, but when heard by foreign ears, the Little Corporal only seemed to confirm the myth. And then there was the hat. Napoleon's hat is one of the most iconic pieces of headwear in history. It was a simple black felt bicorn, but the way he wore it was entirely unique. Most officers of the time wore their bicorn hats with the points facing forwards and backwards, creating a sharp, narrow silhouette. Napoleon wore his en bataille sideways, with the points parallel to his shoulders. There was a practical reason for this. In the smoke and chaos of a battlefield, his generals could spot his distinctive silhouette instantly. The wide, flat top of the sideways hat made him immediately recognizable. But this unique style also had a curious visual effect. It made his entire upper body appear wider and more grounded, but it did nothing to add to his height. In fact, it might have made him appear more squat. His boots, too, were practical. Low-heeled riding boots, not the high-heeled shoes favoured by the old aristocracy. He was dressed not for courtly elegance, but for the battlefield. Finally, we must consider the portraits, the grand official paintings that were meant to define his legacy. If you look at the famous painting by Jacques-Louis David, the Emperor Napoleon in his study at the Tuileries, you see Napoleon standing by his desk. He does not look towering, but he does not look comically short either. He looks like a man of average proportions, his presence conveyed not through physical size, but through his intense gaze and the sheer energy of the scene, which depicts him having worked all night for his people. In many official portraits, artists of the era were more concerned with conveying power and authority than with photorealistic accuracy. They would use symbolism, the Roman laurel wreath, the hand on the globe, to express the subject's importance. Napoleon's power was in his mind, his ambition, his force of will. Perhaps the artists felt that emphasizing his physical stature was unnecessary. His greatness was of a different kind. So we are left with a fascinating tapestry of facts and fictions. A man of average height, made to look smaller by the giants he chose for his guard. A nickname of affection twisted into an insult by his enemies. And an iconic hat that made him easy to spot but did nothing to make him look taller. The records are clear, but perception, it seems, is a much more powerful thing. The height, born in the print shops of London, created a reality all its own, a story so good that the truth never quite managed to catch up. A story, when told often enough, can take on a life of its own. It can escape the dusty pages of history books and the yellowed paper of old newspapers. It can weave its way so deeply into our culture that it stops being a story and starts feeling like a fact. And sometimes a story can become so powerful that it leaps from the world of folklore into the world of science. Or at least, what sounds like science. This is what happened to the myth of the little general. It became so famous, so universally understood, that in the early 20th century it was given a new, more clinical-sounding name. It became a psychological term, the Napoleon complex. Let's travel forward in time, leaving the age of empires behind and arriving in the quiet, wood-panelled office of an early psychoanalyst, perhaps a follower of the famed Alfred Adler. Imagine the scent of old books and pipe tobacco. Here, the idea of Napoleon's height was given a new and fascinating interpretation. Adler proposed a theory called inferiority complex, the idea that feelings of inadequacy, whether real or perceived, could be a driving force in a person's life. From this fertile ground, the Napoleon complex grew. The theory is simple and intuitive. It suggests that people of shorter stature, particularly men, feel a sense of inadequacy in a world that often equates height with power. To overcome this perceived disadvantage, they might overcompensate. They might become more aggressive, more domineering, more ambitious, more eager to seek power and status to make up for what they lack in physical height. And who was the perfect poster child for this new theory? Who else but Napoleon Bonaparte? The story fit perfectly. Here was a man who was, according to the popular myth, very short. And here was a man who was, without question, one of the most ambitious and power-hungry individuals in all of history. He had conquered nations, crowned himself emperor, and plunged a continent into war. It seemed like a perfect open and shut case. His immense ambition must have been a direct compensation for his small size. The myth, once a piece of political propaganda, was now reborn with a veneer of scientific legitimacy. The term entered our vocabulary and has remained there ever since. We hear it in casual conversation. A boss who is demanding and aggressive might be jokingly accused of having a Napoleon complex. A politician who seems overly combative might be described in the same way. It has become a convenient psychological label, a simple explanation for complex human behavior. But here is where our story takes another gentle turn. Just as we questioned the historical record of his height, let us now question the scientific record of this so-called complex. The first, most glaring problem, as we now know, is that the entire premise is based on a falsehood. Napoleon wasn't short. He was of average height, so to name a complex about short people's behavior after a man who wasn't short is, to put it mildly, a bit ironic. It is like naming a fear of water after a fish. But let's set that aside for a moment. Let's look at the core idea itself. Is there any scientific evidence that shorter men are in fact more aggressive or more likely to seek power? For decades, researchers have tried to study this. Imagine a quiet university laboratory. Volunteers of different heights are put through psychological tests and scenarios to measure their aggression, their ambition, their reactions to provocation. The results of these studies have been, to put it gently, inconclusive. Some studies have found a very slight correlation, while others have found none at all. There is simply no strong, consistent scientific evidence to prove that a person's height has any direct causal relationship with their level of aggression or their desire for power. Human personality is an incredibly complex tapestry woven from threads of genetics, upbringing, culture, and individual life experience. To reduce something as profound as a person's ambition to a single physical attribute is a vast oversimplification. So why do we love the idea of the Napoleon complex so much? Why does it feel so right? Perhaps it's because we are, as human beings, natural storytellers. We are drawn to simple, satisfying narratives that explain the world around us. The idea that a powerful person's ambition is just a compensation for a physical insecurity is a very compelling story. It makes the great and powerful seem more human, more vulnerable. It cuts them down to size, just as James Gilray's cartoons did 2 centuries ago. It's a way of making sense of people whose drive and ambition seem almost superhuman. Let's allow ourselves a quiet, gentle thought experiment. Imagine an alternate history. Imagine if Napoleon Bonaparte had been 6 feet tall. Imagine a towering general with the same brilliant mind, the same relentless energy, the same boundless ambition. Would we view him differently? Would his story be told with a different tone, but as a natural extension of his commanding physical presence? Perhaps his desire for power would seem less like a psychological quirk and more like his obvious destiny. Would history have unfolded in the same way? It's impossible to know. But what we do know is that the myth of his height created a story so powerful that it shaped not just our perception of him, but our very language for describing human nature. The Napoleon complex is a perfect example of a meme, long before the age of the internet. It was an idea that was catchy, easy to understand, and endlessly repeatable, regardless of the fact that its foundation was built on little more than a misunderstanding of inches and a few very clever cartoons. The man was of average height, but his legend, it seems, cast a very short shadow. Having seen how a myth can morph into a modern psychological term, let us travel back once more to its source. Let us return to the smoky, lamp-lit world of 19th century London and Paris to understand that this was never really a story about height. It was always a story about power and how to fight it. It was a battle for perception, waged with the most effective weapons of the age, the printing press and the engraver's tool. Propaganda is not a new invention. It is as old as warfare itself. But the Napoleonic Wars coincided with a golden age of mass media. For the first time, newspapers were widely circulated and printed caricatures could be produced cheaply and quickly, reaching thousands of people. The British government and the talented satirists who worked alongside it understood the power of this new medium with a chilling clarity. They knew that to defeat Napoleon, they had to defeat the idea of Napoleon. Let's look closer at their methods. The name they gave him, Little Boney, was a stroke of genius. It was familiar, dismissive, and slightly childish. It stripped him of the grand imperial title he had given himself, Napoleon I, Emperor of the French, and reduced him to a simple, almost silly nickname. Every time a British citizen read a newspaper article that referred to Little Boney, a small subconscious seed was planted. This man is not so grand after all. The visual propaganda was even more potent. We mentioned James Gilray, but he was just one of a small army of satirists. Imagine walking through London and seeing their prints displayed in shop windows. They showed Napoleon as a tiny figure, often being physically overwhelmed by the much larger, portly figure of John Bull, the personification of England. He was depicted as a dwarf trying to climb into a giant throne, or as a tiny Gulliver being tied down by the Lilliputian forces of the British army. The purpose of this was profound. Fear is a powerful tool of war, and Napoleon was genuinely feared across Europe. His military victories were legendary, his strategic mind unparalleled. To the average person, he must have seemed like an unstoppable force of nature. The propaganda served as a psychological shield by making the source of the fear seem small, comical, and absurd. It made the fear itself more manageable. It allowed people to laugh at the monster under the bed. It's hard to be terrified of an enemy when you've just seen a cartoon of him being chased by a goose. This tactic of diminishing an enemy is a timeless one. It is a way of controlling the narrative, of asserting dominance not on the battlefield, but in the hearts and minds of the people. Making your enemy small is a way of making your own side feel bigger, stronger, and more confident. Now, let's contrast this with how power was traditionally portrayed. Let's imagine walking through the grand halls of an ancient palace, whether in Rome, Egypt, or Persia. Look at the official sculptures and reliefs of the great emperors and pharaohs. Are they depicted as men of average height? Almost never. They are shown as giants towering over their subjects and their enemies. An Egyptian pharaoh is shown 3 times larger than the prisoners he is smiting. A Roman emperor on a cartouche is depicted with a divine, powerful physique, his stature exaggerated to reflect his immense authority. Throughout history, power and size have been intrinsically linked in our art and in our minds. To be powerful was to be big. The British propagandists simply and brilliantly inverted this ancient tradition. They took the most powerful man in the world, and through the magic of ink and paper, they made him small. It's fascinating to draw a quiet parallel to our own modern world. The tools have changed, but the principles remain the same. The woodcut print has been replaced by the digital meme. The newspaper has been replaced by the endless scroll of social media feeds. But the art of shaping perception, of creating fake news or distorting an opponent's image, is very much alive. A single unflattering photo of a politician can go viral, defining their public image more than any policy speech. A short, out-of-control video clip can be used to make a respected leader look foolish. A clever, dismissive nickname can stick to a public figure for their entire career. We live in an age that is saturated with this kind of information warfare. It is a constant battle for our perception. The story of Napoleon's height is a gentle, 200-year-old reminder of this enduring truth. It shows us how easily a narrative can be crafted, how a simple distortion can be repeated until it becomes a fact, and how images can shape our understanding of reality far more powerful than written records. The war against Napoleon was not just fought with cannons and cavalry, it was fought with ideas and images, a quiet, relentless campaign to convince the world that the most powerful man in Europe was, in fact, nothing more than Little Boney. Our journey is now nearing its end. We have travelled through the smoky print shops of London, the formal archives of the French military, and the quiet theoretical offices of early psychology. We have seen how a simple misunderstanding of inches, amplified by the powerful engine of wartime propaganda, created a myth so enduring it became a part of our language. And so we arrive at our final, quiet conclusion. In the end, does it matter? Does it matter whether Napoleon Bonaparte was 5'2" or 5'7"? The truth is, his physical height is perhaps the least significant thing about him. It is a historical footnote that has been allowed to overshadow the enormous, complex, and controversial legacy of the man himself. Whether he was tall or short, he was still the man who seized control of France in the chaotic aftermath of its revolution. He was still the military genius who won dazzling victories at Austerlitz and Jena. He was still the emperor who crowned himself in Notre Dame Cathedral, a profound statement of power taken rather than given. He was still the lawgiver whose Napoleonic code brought rational, uniform laws to France and much of Europe, influencing legal systems to this day, and he was still the tyrant whose boundless ambition led to years of brutal, continent-wide warfare and the deaths of millions. His height changes none of these facts. His impact on history remains immense, a force that shaped the modern world. To truly understand the man and not the myth, let us make one final journey. Let us travel with him to his last lonely home, the island of St. Helena. Imagine a wind-swept rock in the middle of the vast, empty South Atlantic Ocean, thousands of miles from anywhere. This is where the great powers of Europe sent him to live out his final days, a place from which there could be no escape. Picture him in his house at Longwood, a damp and modest building constantly shrouded in mist. The man who once commanded armies that stretched to the horizon now spends his days dictating his memoirs, tending to his garden, and staring out at the grey, endless sea. The grand uniforms are gone, replaced by simpler clothes. The boundless energy that had once terrified Europe is now contained, turned inward. His health is failing. The man who once seemed to live on horseback, in these quiet final years, we see not the emperor or the general, but the man. We see it in the careful, almost obsessive way he planned his garden, trying to create a small patch of order in his chaotic exile. We see it in the way he would read books for hours, his mind still restless, still hungry for knowledge. And most profoundly, we see it in his memories of the great love of his life, his first wife, Josephine de Beauharnais. He had divorced her years before because she could not provide him with an heir, a cold political decision that he reportedly regretted for the rest of his life. In the quiet of his exile, surrounded by the sound of the wind and the waves, his thoughts often turned to her. He would speak of her with a deep and abiding tenderness. It is said that the very last word he uttered on his deathbed was her name, Josephine. In that single word we find a truth far more compelling than any measurement of his height. We find a human being, a man of immense contradictions, a brilliant rationalist and a passionate romantic, a revolutionary hero and a power-hungry dictator. A man who could order thousands to their deaths on a battlefield, but whose heart, at the very end, called out for the woman he loved. This is the man who has been replaced by the meme of Little Boney, and this is so often what happens with history. The complex, messy, contradictory truth of a human life is sanded down over time, polished into a simple, easily digestible story. We remember the caricature, and we forget the person. We remember the myth, and we forget the man. So as our journey comes to a close, let this be our final, gentle thought. History is not just a collection of facts and dates. It is a collection of stories. And the stories we tell and repeat have the power to shape our understanding of the world. But it is always worth pausing every now and then to quietly question them, to look a little deeper, to seek out the person behind the portrait, the truth behind the tall tale. And the next time someone says Napoleon was short, you can just smile. And maybe, quietly, you can ask them, compared to what? That final question, compared to what, is perhaps the most important one of all. It is a question that invites us to think not just about Napoleon, but about how we measure greatness itself. It asks us to consider the scale we use to judge the figures of the past, and indeed, the people in our own lives. Was Napoleon short compared to his own imperial guard? Yes, absolutely. He surrounded himself with giants, and in their company he appeared smaller. But was he short compared to the average French soldier who followed him into battle with unwavering loyalty? No. To them, he was of a familiar, average height. One of them, Le Petit Caporal, was his ambition outsized compared to that of a humble shopkeeper in Paris? Of course. His dreams were continental, his appetite for power seemingly infinite, but was it outsized compared to that of Alexander the Great, who wept when he had no more worlds to conquer, or Julius Caesar, who crossed the Rubicon and remade a republic into an empire? Perhaps not. His ambition was on the scale of history itself. The question teaches us a gentle lesson in perspective. So much of what we believe to be true depends entirely on our point of view, on the background we choose to place it against. The myth of Napoleon's height worked so well because his enemies were masters of scale. They took the man and placed him against a backdrop of their own choosing, next to their tall king, next to the allegorical giant of John Bull. And in doing so, they shrank him. They controlled the comparison. But what if we choose a different scale? Let us, for a final quiet moment, remove him from the battlefield and the throne room. Let us not compare him to other men at all. Let us place him against the backdrop of his own accomplishments, his own ideas. Imagine the Napoleonic Code, that immense revolutionary legal document he commissioned. Picture it not as words on a page, but as a vast, invisible structure bringing order and reason to a nation fractured by revolution. It established meritocracy, protected religious freedom, and created a single rational set of laws for all citizens. Compared to the tangled, ancient, and deeply unjust legal system it replaced, that code is a towering monument. In its presence, the physical height of its creator seems utterly irrelevant. Imagine the map of Europe before him, a patchwork of tiny, confusing states and ancient feudal territories. And then picture the map he left behind, forever altered, setting in motion the forces of nationalism and modernity that would shape the next 2 centuries. Compared to the sheer scale of that geopolitical change, the question of a few inches seems almost comical. Our journey tonight was never really about proving a man's height. It was about exploring how a simple story can be told, how it can be twisted and shaped, and how it can stick to a person like a shadow. It was a journey into the nature of perception itself. And now, as the story ends, let that thought be a gentle comfort. The world is full of stories, full of scales and comparisons. We are all in some way measured by others, placed against backdrops we did not choose. But our true measure is not found in how we compare to those around us. It is found in the quiet, unseen architecture of our own lives, in our ideas, in our kindness, in the legacy we build, big or small. Let the noise of comparison fade away. Let the myths and the caricatures dissolve into the quiet of the night. And as you drift into sleep, may you find a sense of your own true scale, vast and unique, and perfectly, peacefully yours. Sleep well,